Welcome to Breaking Big, where we interview people about their careers in the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Erin Neumeyer. Everyone here at Thunder Tally Media is so excited to announce that we are being featured on the Hoo Ha Ha app under the Podcast We Love section. They are on a mission to spotlight and support women in comedy. One of the ways they do that is by amplifying women's voices, like this podcast. If you haven't already, go check out the hoohaha.com website. There's so much great content there. That's where you'll find my podcast and all the other shows featured under the Podcast We Love section. And now I'd like to welcome you to Breaking Big. Hi there. Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Erin Neumeyer. Just a little bit of housekeeping at the top. This episode is being broadcast live on camera to our Thunder Tally Media pages on Facebook and our YouTube channel. So if you're listening in podcast only mode, you can always rewatch to see our videos or the photos there, and on Stitcher, which now offers a video option. So let's get started. I'm so excited for today. This is the one with Lisa Cole. She is a California-born and Arkansas-bred writer, director, and producer. And you can tell by her work that she is obsessed with the beauty and brutality of life. In every project, she amplifies underrepresented voices and exposes social injustices, like when she directed documentaries for the Gates Foundation, the Sundance Institute, BET, and A&E. As a writer, Lisa has placed in the quarterfinals in Academy Nichols, was a regional finalist in the Student Academy Awards, and the winner of the Page International Screenplay Competition. Her short films have also been very well received. One was an official selection of the Diversity at Cannes Fest, which we will talk about later, and her most recent premiered at the Academy Qualifying LA Shorts Festival last year. Lisa has several feature screenplays in development with acclaimed producers, and she's been busy on the festival circuit with her most recent film, Bienvenidos a Los Angeles. Welcome to the show, Lisa.
Hey, Erin. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so thrilled to have you. We have a lot to talk about today. You have been so busy making incredible content. I always like to ask people, how did they get started? So what's your story?
Oh, man. When I was finishing up high school, I actually joined this international traveling group called Up With People. Some people think it's a cult. It is not. But it was a very great experience as a young person. I traveled for 3 years internationally, lived with 201 host families in 12 countries, performed on stage almost nightly, and was in charge of the show. I ended up working for them for 2 years of those 3 years. And, I think I knew that I loved dancing, but I didn't want to be a dancer. I just knew that I wanted to find a way to incorporate movement into, and I had always been intrigued by writing. And so I loved movies, and I just thought that would be a kind of a good avenue to pursue things that I loved. I went to film school at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. I had to pay I had to work to pay for school and put myself through school. And I started working early on in production outside of school. As a PA on my first gigs, I really started gravitated towards the camera department, not because I wanted to be a DP, but I just really wanted to be right there where the action was happening. And eventually I got in with the camera guys, and they hired me as the camera PA and then taught me how to be a second. A film loader. I started working as a second AC a lot on commercials, music videos, and low budget features, some even soft porn, unfortunately, but whatever to kind of get your foot in the door and get experience. And so I started that way. And then I'd say one of my first legit jobs was I got hired as an associate producer at VH1 MTV Networks. And I started associate producing behind the music. And after a few months, they promoted me to producer. So,
wow, that's amazing. And also, especially these days, you don't see as many women in the camera department. So I imagine back then you were probably one of the few that you came across. Is that right?
Oh, totally. It was all men. It was all men. They're very jovial and they're great storytellers. They're usually
Mhm.
kind of rocketeers and they're also like risk takers. I feel like DPs are really interesting people. But I always had my little notebook and they would make fun of me. But I took notes of like, okay, what lens are we using? Why are we doing this? What camera? What what's the f-stop? What are we what are we doing and why? And it was great to be because cameras always chill usually on set. You're kind of waiting on everybody else. And so it was a really good place to be right next to the director and the DP and just kind of hang out there, except for when I was back in the camera truck changing film. We shot on film a lot then with the music videos and stuff. So I would be in the dark room a lot too. But that's always really nerve wracking. I knew I didn't want to be a second AC for long, but it was a good learning spot.
Wow, that's fantastic. And then, like, how did you, I'm jumping around here. Sorry. Before we get into like the writing and that kind of part, I wanted to bring up the fact that you and your husband are both in the industry. And I just wondered, what is that like? You know, like first of all, kind of what does he do? And then how does that affect like your family life?
Oh yeah. It's not easy. I mean, it's great on the one hand because we have a shorthand. We understand what what each other does, and we can completely relate. At the end of the day, we know what each other's days have been like, more or less, because we work in the same industry. And we used to write together. We still do sometimes. We've written a couple of narrative screenplays co-written together. We're actually just finishing a rewrite on one right now for a producer, but his name is Mark Monroe, and he does primarily documentaries as a writer, as a producer, and sometimes as a director. And he's been really fortunate. They've won 2 Academy Awards for Best Documentary, and he's won a WGA Award and Emmy recently, and yeah, all kinds of stuff. So he's had a lot of success in the documentary world, and it's been really fun to see and a really amazing projects. And
That's
how we
fantastic.
manage it. The
Yeah,
question
I'm
was,
just wondering because if you're both doing, because I know you also worked in doc at one point, and that's from what I understand, you know, the shoots can be like travel intensive and then very time consuming. So you're away from home a lot, and I just can't imagine if you're both on a project at the same time. How do you manage?
yeah, we don't have family out here either, and so we spend the equivalent of a mortgage, I'd say, every month on childcare. Yeah, so it's intense, and we've been really fortunate to have the same caregiver now for quite a few years. And before her, we had another wonderful woman helping us, who really become our family. These 2 individuals, we couldn't do life without them. So that is the bottom line. That is totally the truth. If you can't afford childcare, I really don't know how people manage. I mean, something has to give, right? I feel like I'm sacrificing all the time, and my kids bring me to my knees, and I feel like I'm failing as a mom or something. Last night I had a huge deadline for something I was turning in, and I was such a grump because they all were trying to pester me for things. And I was just like, stop, don't talk to me. I've got to get this in by 6 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock Eastern. It's due. Blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I mean, a little bit of a banshee. I'll be honest, it's something that we don't have perfected. I don't know who does. I kudos to whoever can figure it out. And I wish I could say we were that family that has dinner together at the table every night at 6. It doesn't happen. I mean, we try to have dinner together since COVID. That's actually was a good thing because we, work at home now. But working at home is beautiful, but it's also challenging because something always comes up. There's always interruptions. And especially, no offense to men. I mean, my husband's so great. I mean, I'm so lucky. I can't complain. He carries way more than a lot of men do in relationships that I know about, in terms of friendships that I have with other women and things I hear. But it's hard, like I have to constantly think ahead for everybody. Like, oh crap, the dogs are going to be out of food. The cat needs to go to the vet. My daughter's rain boots don't fit anymore because it was last season when she used them. And oh crap, it's like there's always a million, like make sure everyone goes to the dentist, whatever it is. I feel like those kind of things still kind of all fall on mom.
I totally know what you mean. I was at a networking event last night, and I was like, "Oh, Marley's dance class starts in 20 minutes. I better text them to make sure she gets there."
Yeah, I think I was supposed to be at that same event, and I missed it because I just couldn't get there.
Yeah, well, I understand if you had that deadline, they were definitely overlapping.
And I feel like it's not really something that's gotten better in the industry in terms of, I'll just share a quick story, but recently I was up for a lab and I got accepted to the lab and it was run by a woman. And I thought that there would be more understanding, but the commitment was so intense every week on Saturdays for 3 hours or so on a Zoom. And I just said, well, for 5, 6 months. And I said, well, total transparency, I'm going to have a couple soccer games and a couple film festivals to attend to. Plus my kids have spring break, which we haven't made plans yet, but there might be some Saturdays. Like, how can we make this work? How can I work? And they weren't willing to work with me on it. So I got kicked out.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, really? I thought like we've got to find a way to support one another so that it's doable, so that as women, it's already really hard to kind of juggle both.
But it's also kind of sad that they expect the dads to miss out on all that stuff too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's like that means your husband was missing the soccer games. Your husband would have been missing spring break. Like any man, not just your husband, but like I'm just saying any father that's in this industry, like why is the burden all on women, and why is it only women that talk about these things? I always say that, at some point I'm going to start interviewing like male allies and stuff on this podcast. And I plan to ask them the same question, how they balance their family life, because I feel like it's one of those things we don't ask the men, like I'm always asking the women because this is my reality as a woman. I'm always dealing with this in the industry, but I want it to be normal for the men to talk about it too.
Yeah. I mean, not to scare people off, but I'll tell you, my husband he works literally till 1 or 2 every morning because he wants to have dinner with everybody. And then he wants to be available in the evening, before it's bedtime for the kids. But then that means he's working literally, I'm not joking, like till 1 or 2 every morning. So that's the dedication. That's kind of what it takes in the industry. And I don't know how that's going to change anytime soon. I don't know how it's not really sustainable though. Right.
No, I mean, it definitely takes an impact on your mental health, which was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, like how do you deal with, I mean, you've got these crazy deadlines and I mean, look, your films, you've entered a million, like writing contests and film festivals, and you can tell that your projects always do really well, but every one of those was an application and a fee and, effort and all of the stuff that, you don't really realize. And then what about the ones that you didn't get into? I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes it feels like you're doing a lot of work. Not just you, but anybody might feel like they're doing a lot of work. And then the result is this like mystery and nobody knows how hard you're working.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes, we'll go to events and I feel like if I'm standing next to Mark, if people don't know me, they'll ask, "Hey, Lisa, good to see you. How are the kids?" Because they're like, they don't know what to ask. And I'm like, the kids are great, but
by the way, my film festival just screened.
No, but mental health, it's something that I've actually been talking to people about lately. I feel like I wish our industry would start more conversations around this topic. And I wish we would do a better job at supporting one another in terms of, the tricky part is trying to figure out how do you find peace and satisfaction in the process, as opposed to assigning all those good feels and sense of self-worth to attaching them to the outcome, right? And when you hear highly acclaimed people speak about that, it's like, yeah. But what about the middleman, the person that's had like a modicum of success, but there's still things that they want to achieve. It's difficult. It's a challenge. And I would love to see us embrace more honest conversations around that, because I know it's something that men struggle with, women struggle with, we all struggle with that, assigning self-worth to the outcome when these projects, especially, I can only speak for me personally on this, but I pursue things that are like 100% passion projects. Probably could have picked an easier route with some things if I'd not cared as much, but when you care deeply about a project, it's hard not to take it personal. And then it's also really hard to sometimes assimilate. I feel like, one good example, I have a project called Girl Named Sue that I haven't given up on. I'll just say it's been in the works for 10 years. It's longer than that, but anything longer than that starts to sound kind of crazy. But we do know those stories where it's much longer, right? And it's longer than 10, but we've had lots of different incarnations. In the most recent one, we had Shailene Woodley attached and Laura Bickford producing and Jean-Marc Vallée.
That is impressive. Yeah.
We had a director attached who was lovely. I worked with him for a year on this script, and he came and we did location scouting, and everything was like, we got the California tax credit as one of 4 projects. Full steam ahead. We had about 95% of our financing. Endeavor Content was financing with us. And then COVID hit.
Mm.
And then, everything.
And that's like hundreds of hours of work.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just that one incarnation of the project was almost 2 years to that point, and then COVID hit. And then, but remember, the project had a life before that. COVID hit, and then, and then Jean-Marc, we were starting to regroup, and then Jean-Marc Vallée died suddenly.
Oh, that's so sad. I'm so sorry.
And it's so tragic for him and his family and the industry, because such an amazing talent, but also the project, because it's like, oh my goodness, anyway, trying to figure out how to regroup from that now, how to push it forward, maybe in a new incarnation again. Yeah. So I guess the message is about resiliency, but also trying to figure out a way to find peace with the ups and downs, right, in the industry. So, and we all have those stories. But I mean, I guess I can take like solace in knowing like, wow, we got so much further than most people ever get, right, with something. But still,
I know it's so hard because there's no like tangible outcome from that. It's just, you know what I mean? It's like, there's nothing to share. There's nothing to talk. Like, oh, it's so frustrating. This, like, you really, until it's all the way done, there's no guarantee. I saw an interview on, I think on like the SAG Instagram, the SAG-AFTRA Instagram page. They do a lot of these like one-on-ones with actors, and it was like Tony Shalhoub was talking about, and I know he's a fairly well-known name. I think like he's not maybe A-list, but he's up there, and he was just talking about like all the projects that he didn't get, and how every one of them hurt. And then, he thought he was so perfect for this thing, and why didn't he get picked? And he's like, you know all of his successes, but then, everybody has to struggle with the days with like, why didn't they pick me? What's wrong with me? What didn't I do? And he was just talking about that, like that struggle that you feel with like to get up and go on after the rejection.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I can imagine as an actor what that's like. And you're an actor, I know. So
yeah.
Yes. So anyway, I mean, I feel like these things have a life bigger than me, because I've taken on social injustices and different things in my, they're usually always about sharing women's stories, my projects, and projects that highlight social injustices or underrepresentation. And so I just sort of have to have faith that it's not its time yet, but that doesn't mean it's over, right? You got to keep going and look for the next slipstream. You got to look for that next jet stream and jump in there. So,
well, that brings me to I definitely want to talk to you about you did a lot of documentaries before you became a narrative filmmaker. So I'm just wondering, like, kind of what drew you to like doc films, and then like then you made the leap. And I know a lot of your documentary films had to do with like highlighting women's health and safety, and I believe you went to Kenya for one. I'm not totally sure. I was trying to look up some of the stuff. They're a little hard to find. Yeah.
I've been to Africa twice, and both times, my first time to Africa was to go work in the Congo, which is a much different part of Africa, even than somewhere like Kenya. So yeah, the DRC, that was a crazy trip. I was going there to document this woman's work on creating a floating health clinic along the world's longest lake. It's called Lake Tanganyika, and so we were going there for a couple of weeks to this place called Moba Territory that's only accessible basically by like humanitarian flights, and you land on a dirt tarmac, and then they take off and they're gone. And my son was, I only had one child at the time, and he was 2 or 3. And literally, like, I remember meeting with the UNHCR, the United Nations human rights folks on the ground there, and they were telling us that an anniversary was coming up since the repatriation of the area. So people had come back, and they were they were all driven out earlier, years before, into refugee camps, unfortunately, from violence and fighting. But now people had come back, and so it was like a year anniversary, I think, of that. And they weren't sure what to expect, and they were like telling us that the only way out was the lake. And then they showed us the boat, which to me looked like it could hold about maybe 15 people. So I was, at that point, I remember going, gosh, wait, what am I doing here? But I mean, everything was fine. Luckily, nothing happened in terms of an uprising. And the people there that we met were incredible. And I was able to make a short documentary that was for, it was Melinda Gates, one of Melinda Gates's initiatives around maternal health, because there was unfortunately, such a high maternal death rate, infant and mother mortality rate in that area, just because they were lacking such basic supplies. On their shelves were literally barren. So something that you would never, like a minor hemorrhage, like you wouldn't necessarily die from that in a Western country, but because their hospitals are so remote, they just don't have supplies. And so that was why I was there, to kind of highlight what local people on the ground are doing to really support maternal health there, and to educate people about the importance of maternal health. And then, like I said, I was with that woman who was working on, and she's still working on, creating this floating clinic so that every month, even if you live at a really remote part of the lake, supplies are going to come to you. So I really hope that can happen, because people definitely need it.
That's so amazing. I love that you did that kind of work, and I hope that inspires some of our listeners to look into those sort of opportunities. It's so much easier even now to get to different places, and you don't really need as much equipment as you probably needed back in the day to do those kinds of projects. So really cool. And then you made the jump over to like movie writing and filmmaking.
Yeah. I had done a couple docs in the other one was in Kenya and Nairobi, about simple self-defense techniques to keep young girls and women safe. And that film won some awards. I think it won the best documentary short at the Newport Beach Film Festival. And and from there, I was still I was kind of transitioning out of working for MTV and for networks. I had done biography style television for a while. And I was looking to continue writing narratives, because I'd made some narrative shorts back in film school, and then out of film school, I made a couple, and I really wanted to get back into that. So I found the article for Girl Named Sue some years before that in the California Times section. And so that was something that we were pursuing, and I just started writing other spec scripts, essentially, and have been lucky to attract attention with them. So I currently have 3 or 4 in development right now, and a new one in the works. Really excited about a producer that I've just partnered with on a book that I optioned. It's a biography story that's a true story, last summer. So working.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Well, what I wanted to do is play your trailer for one of your award-winning shorts, Shipwreck. So you could tell us more about that. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I would love to see that whole film. It looks amazing. So why don't you tell us a little bit, like what inspired you to make this film?
Yeah, we shot that a couple summers ago during the pandemic lockdown, actually, in LA. My family, those are my kids on screen. And so I was just kind of looking around going, how can we make something that sort of speaks to this moment, this very unique moment in our history, in our time? And as a family too, we were going through a lot of things we are a biracial family, and my daughter, who's African American, was adopted at birth. We adopted her at birth and completed our family when she was 3 days old. And but we were all going through a lot of challenges, and the kids were suffering, as everybody was, from loss of routine and everything, and it was bringing up a lot of emotions for all of us. And I just thought, I have to figure out a way to kind of memorialize some of this, but also a way to give homage to the collective loss in our world. And so that's just what came about Shipwreck. And it's essentially about a young girl in a family who's lost her mom, and she's trying to navigate that grief and sense of self, and trying to figure out her place in the world. And it's a 9-minute film. Gosh, we were lucky. It was in like over 40 festivals, and people really like it. It's sweet. There's no dialogue. We shot with 2 iPhones. My friend Gilbert, who's a DP, he and I shot everything. He was the DP, and I was kind of second camera with our little iPhone cameras. We had a gimbal, which didn't work right most of the days, and so we ended up doing handheld. And
I have one of those gimbals too, and for some reason it like makes you use some other software, and I have half the time it won't connect. So
yeah, we were having that problem, especially out at the beach and stuff, and so we just scrapped it. But I didn't want any other crew members. It was just the 4 of us, because at the time it was before the vaccines even. So so I knew that I had to do something MOS, like without sound. And it was kind of like going back to film school when you made that first short film. That was an exercise in my class of, okay, you got to tell this with no dialogue. And so but I found that kind of freeing. And I also knew that like my kids aren't actors, and I didn't want to give them lines. And it was hard enough sometimes to like get them to emote on a 100-degree day. I had to bribe that. There's this shot where my daughter's looking up and all happy. And it was because I was bribing her with a can of Coca-Cola right off the screen. And I was like, whatever it takes, like she was so fed up at that point. I think we filmed for like 5 days, and they were sick of me, but it was really fun too.
Yeah, I know, but both of my kids do a little bit of acting, and there's been definitely times with both of them where I'm like, you guys, we committed. We're here now. And like there's always like a moment where you're like, I've already said this 10 times. Why do they want me to say it an 11th time? So it's that kind of thing where I think you spared your kids a lot by not having them do lines. And like, she emotes so beautifully. Wow. I mean, she seems like she would be quite a talented actor.
I'm leaving it up to her. I think she is going to do a theater camp this summer. She's now 11. I think she was 8. She just turned 11 like a couple weeks ago, but she was 8, I think, when we shot that, and 8 or 9. Anyway, we'll see if it's still her passion. She swore she didn't want to do it again after that, but I think she's still kind of got the bug. She's been to a couple of film festivals with me now, and been able to do like a red carpet and, talk after the screening of her film. And she usually jokes with the audience, like, I don't want to work with Mom again, but, maybe another director.
That's hilarious. So she's a little comedian.
Yeah. It's good. It's good. I mean, she is great. She's won a couple of Best Actress awards.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. The film has gotten a lot of love, so that's really been fun, exciting.
Yeah, that's so cool. And how impressive to shoot with the iPhones. I keep thinking I could do that, but then I don't. So I always start to get in my head about the gear, and then I'm like, oh, I want to get these lav mics. I want to get the So, but that's cool. I think that's amazing. It came out really well. So I wanted to bring up that this film was one of the official selections in the 2021 Diversity in Cannes Film Festival. And maybe you could explain a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, sure. I think it was started 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer, by Yolanda Brinkley. And my understanding is she, like many people, felt frustrated, like many of us, right? Felt frustrated with Cannes and the fact that it's been predominantly male directors and very few people of color. I think there's only ever been one Black director that's won an award there. And I mean, it's just kind of crazy. And so she started a Diversity in Cannes to make a statement about that. There she is. Yeah. And she's kind of a badass. I've not had the fortune of meeting her in person yet, but we've exchanged quite a few emails, and I think I've been on a Zoom with her, and so my film was accepted. I didn't get to go to Cannes for that. They did go in person, a contingency of the filmmakers, and Yolanda, I think she goes every year. So we'll see.
I read that she's fluent in French, so I'm sure that helps too.
I'm sure that does. Yeah. They're there on the ground making a statement, and, and the festival is growing. So it's really great to see.
Yeah, I looked it up on Film Freeway, and the submission, I think, have closed for this year. But you guys should definitely go log in there and check it out, and maybe you can qualify for the next round.
Yeah, for sure.
So I also wanted to ask you about this because I thought it was so funny. I read somewhere that you always get asked if you were ever a journalist because you kind of embed yourself in your work. And we're about to talk about your next film. And I wondered, like, what does that mean? How do you, what's your special approach to filmmaking, I guess?
Well, I'll just give a really quick example. The first screenplay that I ever wrote, full-length screenplay, was because I saw a picture of a female matador in a magazine, actually I think it was in the LA Times, and it was the Spanish bullfighter, Cristina Sanchez from Spain, and I was so moved by that, and I started attending bullfights. I'm basically vegetarian, so that part of it I didn't love, but the spectacle and the history, and the pageantry and the ritual, there's so much rich history there. And I actually took bullfighting lessons down in Mexico.
Wow.
And I just did so much history. I think I ended up spending 5 years writing that script. And I partnered with a Latino writer too. And yeah, we won all kinds of awards with that script, but it's been really hard to set up. That's not one of the ones currently in development, but I've actually modernized it. And I've spent some time down in the Yucatan. And I'm now looking for collaborators for that project because I've modernized this story that I'm really excited about, and want to look for the right, ideally Mayan female director, writer-director to work with on this brand new idea that
wow, that's great.
But yeah, so I really I kind of approach every subject. When I was writing Girl Named Sue, the project that's kind of on pause at the moment, but we will come back to it and get it done one day. But it's inspired. It's the true story of a woman in Northern California that works to save children from dangerous drug homes. And at the time it was crystal meth homes in the early 90s, when she was going out on drug raids with, she was the only woman on an all-male task force. And, she identified this problem. And the fact is that there's no protocol for children on drug investigations. And there still is not to this day in this country. And so there is a real need for diversity in the workplace. And by having her there, she's literally saving lives. Like, she started the Drug Endangered Children's Protocol nationwide. That's now still in need of funding and still needs to become a law. But just like domestic violence, before there was a protocol for that, there wasn't one. And so it's the same with drug endangered children in this country. And people don't know behind the scenes what is going on. And it's insane. And we could talk a whole hour about that, so I won't go into great detail.
Yeah.
But the point to all that is, when I first met Sue and she agreed to give us the rights to tell her story, I went up there and embedded with her and went out on drug raids and, hung out with all the task force guys, mostly guys, right? She was the only woman, and interviewed everybody and really approach it from a documentary standpoint. And everyone always calls it, "How's your documentary going?" I'm like, I'm not making a documentary. It's a scripted narrative with actors. I can tell people that 100 times and they still think it's a documentary, but that's just because I really, everything I've written is either a true story or inspired by truth or truthful events, which does lead us to the most recent short.
Yes. Well, I would love to play the trailer for Bienvenidos a Los Angeles so that we can talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
The New York Times is reporting that nationwide ICE raids and undocumented
immigration is such a mess in this country.
I'm sorry, Imani, but we can't keep you on here.
I'm so close to getting my green card.
My son is coming from Mexico. He born here. He have papers. Pero I go to LAX. ICE will arrest me.
They are not going to deport you. Please. I just wanted to help.
Wow, that's such a powerful trailer that I started to get like upset. And I think that's probably because I do know that this was based on some true life event. So why don't you tell us what happened?
Yes. So when my son was little, our babysitter at the time was Elizabeth. And before I met her, she had a son herself here in Los Angeles. And she was from Mexico. And I guess when he was about 1, she found it really difficult to continue to work on her own as a single parent and be able to work and deal with raising her son. So she made the decision to take him back to Mexico so her parents could raise him. And so when I met her, she'd already been apart from him for a few years. And it was like a year or 2 after that, she came to me and she's like, Chris is 5 now and he could start school and he was born in the US. He has papers. And she's like, I'm either going to go home and be with him or figure out a way for him to come because I can't be apart from him anymore. And I was like, absolutely. How can I help? And, we used to cry a lot together because, here she was helping me with my son and Christopher was away. It was horrible. And so Elizabeth and I were very close and I offered to go to LAX and pick up Chris when he came in. So she got a flight for him and was able to have him come. And I went to pick him up that night at LAX. So actually I'm not in the film at all. And I didn't want to lens it through my point of view, but the real story is that I went to LAX to pick him up. He got detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and it was so scary. And as a white privileged woman, I took a lot of things for granted. And that night was really eye-opening because I got to step in the shoes of someone who lives with that kind of fear and uncertainty all the time, which is the reality for so many people and immigrants in our country and around the world. So, but anyway, it has a really happy ending. It has an unlikely happy ending. In that the immigration agent was actually a woman herself. Spoiler alert, whatever. It's just a short film, so I don't mind telling the real story. But everything that happened, we shot at LAX at airport, which was amazing too. But everything that happened at the airport is the truth about what happened that night. And the immigration agent eventually came out the door with Christopher a second time, or to let him go, essentially. And I was standing there and Chris didn't speak any English. And the only thing I knew was Bienvenidos a Los Angeles. And because I spoke very little Spanish at that time. And Chris was so scared, he was so wide-eyed. He'd just been detained for like 4 or 5 hours. And it was horrifying. And I thought, okay, let's go. Your mom is waiting for us. Let's go. Let's get out of here. And then I saw the ICE agent walking towards us again. And this part's a little bit different than the film. But then I realized she had her purse over her shoulder and she got close to me and she said, I'm a mom too. I understand these things. Have a good night. And she left the building.
Wow.
And so I've always felt like, first of all, they were doing their due diligence to make sure that the child wasn't being trafficked. And that was really great. That was an important, obviously an important thing for them to do, to make sure he was safe, not just turn him over to some random person because I'm not family. But, we've always felt, Elizabeth and I, that had it maybe been a man or maybe even this ICE agent woman on a different day, the outcome could have been very different. And I think she just decided to lens it not completely through the rule book, not so black and white, but she saw the gray in the situation and she let everybody go. She could have made their lives and even my life really problematic, but it didn't. That didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Thank goodness.
And I'm thankful to say Chris and Elizabeth. Obviously I worked with Elizabeth a lot on the story and I got her permission and asked her if I could share the story of what happened that night to all of us. and she was super behind it, really happy with the film. And we had not seen them in about 6 years, and they actually came out at the holidays and stayed with us for a week, and it was so fantastic to be reunited. And that they're like family to us, so it's so great. I'm so happy that they're doing well. They live in another state. They're thriving. Chris is. It shows at the end. There's pictures.
Where are they now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Elizabeth and Christopher are doing well. She still continues to work and provide for the family. And Chris is a senior in high school and plays violin and planning to go to college. He's applying to college.
Wow, he's my son's age. Yeah.
So
That's amazing. Yeah, and you know, kudos to you, because first of all, I'm sure it was really difficult to do this story in the first place, but then like you did such a beautiful job with it. And then you also have done such a great job of making sure other people are seeing it. And I was hoping to talk to you a little bit about like what that festival process is like, you know, getting how have you been able to get it seen so many places?
well, yeah, you have to apply. Sometimes you get invited, and we've been invited to a couple of situations, touring festivals and things. And but we're just really starting our robust festival run. We started in July, but then something happened where there was a miscommunication, and we missed applying to quite a few dates over the summer. So I started applying a lot in the fall. So now we're starting to see acceptances and rejections, but that's okay. But we won. There's a festival in the UK called Big Sin, which is like Synergy International, and they're a human rights festival that at the heart of their festival, they have all the UN the UN goals for, you know, equality, and they have different ones. And of course, human rights and social, the issue of immigration is one of them. And, you know, everyone deserves to live free, right? And so, yeah, we won all their top awards, which was really rewarding, because it's exactly why we made the film about the extremely high number of immigrants in the world. And they're international immigrants too, because there's different definitions depending on if you're an immigrant within your own country. Like in Ukraine, there's people displaced everywhere, but now there's a bunch of international immigrants that have left Ukraine that are in different countries in the world. So the number at the end of the film has exploded. It's probably, it's a lot more from the Ukraine alone, since we finalized it last July.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. That's insane.
Yeah.
So where can people see it now?
Oh, well, right now, because we're still in a festival run. It's not.
You have to go to a festival, right? Is there one? What's the next one?
We can't have. We can't really share it wide yet. It can't be on Vimeo or YouTube or anything that's accessible yet. Otherwise, you get disqualified from various festivals. So after that, we have distribution. And so we should be rolling it out on the platform in about a year. But I wanted to make sure that the film had a very strong festival, you know, life first, because that's where you really get the chance to interact and see a lot of people and maybe win an award or two or whatever along the way. But yeah, we're nominated for some things coming up. It's really exciting. We just won Best Short Film at the 22nd Annual Moondance International Festival. They've been around for 23 years. And thank you. We got accepted to Oaxaca, which I thought was going to be amazing to show it in Mexico. And then 2 weeks before, Oaxaca canceled. They canceled.
Oh, no.
It was a nightmare, but I decided to take those lemons and make lemonade. And I went anyway, because I had a flight and all this, because I was like, I'm going to that one. And then they canceled. But you know what? I have a friend there from Up With People days, who's Mexican, who lives in Oaxaca. And she's on this nonprofit board with the singer Lila Downs. They have an organization that they run to support Indigenous young girls in the state of Oaxaca, and they sponsor 25 of them a year so that they can go to high school. And they happened to be in Oaxaca City when I was there, and my friend arranged to have a screening of the film for them. And it was the best thing I've ever done yet with the film. None of the girls spoke English, but my friend translated everything. They had so many questions. A couple of them are crying. Many of the hands went up when they asked, like, how many of you have immigration stories in your own families? Half the room raised their hands. And they all wanted to take pictures and talk. And I've been staying in touch on Instagram with some of the girls, and I really hope to go back and find ways to support that nonprofit because they're doing such great work. So.
Wow, that's fantastic. We're getting close to the end of the show, and I know I like to always do a few shout outs to people. One of the folks that I think we were going to talk about a little earlier was you mentioned when you were like taking classes, you actually took some acting classes, even though you don't really think of yourself as an actor, with Terry Schreiber Acting Studio.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I think you had said something about how like helpful that was to you. So I just wanted to make sure we still shouted Terry out, since we kind of glossed over that section. And then I also wanted to make sure that you got to do some shout outs to a few other of the folks that you had worked with. So is there anyone you want to?
Oh, sure. Well, first and foremost, I have to thank Laura Bickford, who's been like a great mentor and friend to me. She's a Academy Award winning producer and the producer on a couple of my projects. We have one that has Selena Gomez attached in the lead right now. Again, another true story that's fascinating, but don't have time to go into it. But we really hope that one goes, because it's another Me Too story that's really intense and incredible. And then Gretchen McGowan, she's had a production at Goldcrest Films in New York, but she's an independent producer of her own. She used to produce Jim Jarmusch's films. She's also on the board of NYWIFT in New York, and she's worked on Carol and Buffalo 66, American Psycho. I mean, so many movies. She's fantastic, and she's a great friend and mentor to me. There's also the Terry Schreiber Studio that you mentioned. Terry's wonderful. He used to come out here and teach courses in LA, but now the studio is thriving still in Chelsea. Edward Norton came out of there. I mean, a whole list of actors have come out of that studio, as well as Joan Shekel here in LA. Joan's intense. I love her to death. She teaches the JSFL labs, the Joan Shekel filmmaking labs. And they're in person and online, but they're usually like intensive weekends. It will kick your butt, and but it makes you dig deep. And I mean, just go in there and volunteer for stuff. Like I said, I'm not really an actor, but I do love it. And I found myself, volunteering for stuff just to push myself. And then I'm like on the floor writhing with another partner while she's like calling out like, action verbs and no dialogue, and you have to emote with your body. I mean, it's intense, but like super fun. And it definitely helps every facet, whether you're a writer, actor, producer, or DP even. It's a great course to take. It's really fun.
I definitely will check that out. That sounds
you should.
really cool to me. And then I also wanted to do a quick shout out. I was at this incredible event last night with Women in Media, and we screened this film. It's a documentary called Brainwashed: Sex, Camera, Power. And it's an incredible film. I think men and women alike should all watch it. It really breaks down exactly why it's so important to be really thoughtful filmmakers, and how women are portrayed in movies, and how men are portrayed too. It's like it's both sides can really affect how we exist in our world. So I highly recommend. You can see it right now. It's on Amazon and Google Play for sure, and probably in a few other places. So if you just search it up, I highly recommend. And otherwise, that's our show. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're always really grateful for all the watches and the comments. I'm going to drop all the links in the show notes as per usual. But you can keep up with Lisa on Instagram. She's got a couple handles. She's got at the Lisa Cole and at Flying Fish Pics. So if you want to touch base with her, you can do it there. Or if you want to learn more about her most recent film, it's at Bienvenidos Film on Instagram. So thanks so much, and see you next week.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Well, that's our show. We hope you loved it. If you did, make sure you're subscribed, tell your friends about it, and why not write us a review? If you know someone that would make a great guest on our show, drop us a line. You can find us on Instagram at Thunder Tally, or go to our website, thundertally.com. This show was produced by Bex Francis. edited by me, Erin Neumeyer. The music was performed and written by Dylan Neumeyer. And our sponsor is Filmcraft LA, so make sure you go check them out. This has been a Thunder Tally Media production.